Welcome to today's horror ghost stories. What happened after I fell over in the forest? It was 8:30 p.m. and I was on my daily run.
I usually like to go on my runs at 8:30 because normally there's not a lot of people around.
I normally go on my runs in a forested area nearby. The trail that I go on usually takes around 40 to 60 minutes depending on the weather. The reason I choose this trail is because of how peaceful and safe it is. Sometimes me and my boyfriend go together, but tonight was not one of them. Here's what happened. I looked in the mirror, deciding whether or not to wear a hoodie under my coat. "Nathan, just wear your hoodie. It's looking a bit dark outside," my boyfriend told me as I put my hoodie on. I said bye and kissed my boyfriend before exiting the house. I shut the door. I realized that my boyfriend was right. It was getting a bit dark and stormy. As I was walking to the forest, I noticed something different. The forest seemed very silent today, and normally it comes to life around this time, but I wasn't worried since there was a storm coming. After some more walking, I finally arrived at the front of the forest.
I always forgot how different and scary.
Looked in the storm, but I was used to it anyway. So I changed into a jog and go to the clearing, where the trailhead starts. Before I could go in the trail, the storm started sort of unnaturally fast, but I still wasn't scared, although I did wish my boyfriend came along.
I now got ready to start the journey through the trailhead.
I got into position and started a quick jog as I exited the clearing.
I waited 30 or so seconds before I
Slowed into a subtle jog, but still quite fast, and I stayed at the speed for around 5 minutes before the rain got quite heavy and I decided to speed up, but
As I was speeding up, I noticed something strange that I've
never seen before. Almost an unnaturally large deer with huge antlers, and as I got closer,
I noticed that this was no deer, but some sort of supernatural creature.
but I did not pay any attention to it and acted as if I didn't see it, because I honestly did not believe my eyes. I was now around 25-30 minutes into the run, and I had almost forgotten what I saw until I got to a thinner bit of the trail, and now I
Slowed and came to stop, but I don't know why. I never stopped here, and why was tonight different? As I was thinking why I stopped, I felt scared and decided to...
pretend to tie my shoelace so I could look around without it being too obvious.
And while I was looking around, I saw it again on
Right the same distance though, and when I looked at the left, I saw two more. These ones seemed far away. Yet it seemed like none of them knew I saw them. After I finished pretending to tie my shoe, I stood up, stretched, and going to position. But before I was going to run honest, the one on the right moved a tiny bit, but made a noise, and I looked. It stared at me, and I started to run. The two on the left seemed to have lost interest in me ages ago, but the one on the right was
following me, but was almost silent, but I did not
look back till I had got through skinny bit of the trail, although now it was quite wide and I felt open almost.
vulnerable. Now I look back, but I didn't see it. I was confused.
It couldn't have just stopped chasing me out of nowhere after a few more seconds of looking at turned around. But while I was turning around, I saw it, and it made a noise, except this time I knew better to ignore it, and I started to run again. But it seemed to know my game, and almost suddenly it had already came to the edge. In those few seconds that I stopped staring at it, but I started to run.
And I heard a loud thump this time. I looked back to see the thing had got one of its antlers almost inside the tree, but I
couldn't get a good look as I went to turn around. My foot got stuck on a tree root. I fell, and I think I could have majorly sprained my ankle and maybe broken a toe or two, but I got up, and when I looked behind me, already accepting my fate, there was nothing, but I did not care. I'd already started to run, holding in the pain, but it was getting very muddy and harder to run. I don't know what the time was now, but I was still running. When I felt the need to look behind me, I did, and I swear in them trees I saw antlers, and I think the creature was trying to disguise itself as a tree. This only made me move faster. I recognized this part of the trail.
I was only 10 minutes away from the end, except every tree I looked at looked like antlers as I was getting closer to the end.
I started to see them two small ones this time. They're on the right one was closer, the other one wasn't so far off it. They stared and were almost as if a part of nature itself except this time as I stared at them.
I got a much better look, extremely,
Long antlers that seemed to be almost trees with no leaves and a
skull for a face, I whimper. Just a tiny little sound.
barely above a whisper this time. They moved back till I couldn't see them no more, except I could hear them. They were now following me, except they didn't seem hostile. Or so I thought. As I got a further down, I could start to make out the trail exit. The exit had no clearing except an overgrown grass field which went on for less than a minute. Put the end, there was a gate, and I knew, the second I get past that gate, it's only a 2-minute walk to my house.
As I was nearing the exit, I realized that I couldn't hear them anymore, and I started
to get hope, and I was so close to the trailhead now I was meters away. But I had this horrible noise which I don't know how to describe. It was almost a roar, but a scream of agonizing
pain all at the same time, with almost a primal meaning to it. This only made me speed up. I think at this point I was
running so fast that when I did get to the gate, I almost slammed into it, but I was too scared to open it, so I jumped.
Over the gate was only about 4 foot tall, and I used my last
bit of energy to run all the way home. And as
soon as I got in, I sat down on the floor, and my
boyfriend came and asked me how was the run before.
Seeing me in the state I was in,
I decided to tell him what happened because I was too
scared and didn't know what I saw. He believed me and said he knows his world is unpredictable and he may not
know half of what is alive because they're too smart for us. It turned out when I fell. I sprained my ankle and broke my big toe. I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to share my experience about what happened, and I'm doing okay now. Nothing else ever happened after that. Next story, Skinwalker in the Ozarks. It has been more than 4 years now since I quit my job at my uncle's car repair shop in southeast Missouri, but what happened that year consistently refuses to leave my mind. Specifically, this would have been July of 2021 near the town I grew up in, a small town where the population never reached 1,000 people. In fact, I believe the most I ever saw the population on the Welcome to Chiquichis sign was 920, like I said, small town. However, like many small towns, this town was old, and this town had a long history. Dating back to the end of the Civil War, the town, named Barnesville at the time, was home to a Confederate-held fort up until 1864 when Union troops, possibly led by the now infamous General Leeper of the region, burnt the entire fort and the town to the ground. Following the war, Barnesville was rebuilt, and its population quickly rose to nearly 5,000 people. But this wasn't the end of the horrendous history in this town, or even the beginning of it. No one knows when the Indians first inhabited the region, but the town had an Indian population which lived upon the hills surrounding the town. Towards the end of the 19th century, these tribes were
dealt with by the government.
Many of their camps were completely burnt down by the military, with remains of certain camps still in the forest and visible if you go hiking. Specifically, these campsites were on the tallest mountains in the region, which will tie into the rest of my story in a rather unfortunate way. At some point in the 1990s, my uncle, let's call him Jesse so I don't keep saying uncle, bought a piece of land just north of town within the Mark Twain National Park. Little did he know at the time, but he had bought the tallest peak for almost 35 miles in all directions. Jesse did this specifically so that the rusted and totaled vehicles could sit far from the highway at the bottom of the hill in order to not ruin the beautiful scenery of the Ozarks. While a smart move company-wise, that decision would come to haunt him until the present day, both figuratively and literally. He would consistently see flashing lights at the top of the hill, not like car lights, not like lampposts, but small flashing yellow lights looking between the cars, always coming in pairs. But they would always be at least 5 feet above the ground, no lower and rarely taller.
Every night.
As the years went on, he would place motion sensor cameras along the road, going up the hill, and at the very top to see if anything would be caught on camera. He would even stand at the bottom of the hill, watching the lights go on and off, but never once did the cameras trigger. These were sensitive cameras too. They were triggered by too much dust flying around and a bug flying around. Fast forward to 2019, when my great-grandmother passed away, he told me about this. Recently, he had captured something or someone on the security cameras going up the hill, and he wanted me to see the video, knowing that I was, and I quote, big into computers and video games. I asked him beforehand if he recognized the figure in any way as any kind of animal, and he said no, that if he had to compare it to something most people know, that it was a combination of a male elk and a massive wolf. But it did something very odd. It stood on its hind legs at some point in the video. Interested, being a teenager with a bit of an interest in cryptids, I agreed to watch the video. I was not at all prepared for what I would see. As he pulled up the video on his computer, I saw that the timestamp for it was around 2:30 in the morning. The hill pitch black, save for a single lamppost lighting the top of the hill in that eerie black and white security camera way, the screen glitching every so often. It must have took no more than 10 seconds before the creature crawled into the light on all fours, a good distance from the camera. Unfortunately, due to the distance, we couldn't make out precise details of the creature, but it was more than enough detail to scare the crap out of me. As it crawled further into the light, it turned its head towards the camera, which was located behind it, as if the thing knew where it was at all times. Once its head turned, the pair of massive antlers like you would see on an elk were revealed, slightly glowing in the moonlight. Its eyes, at least the one we could see on the camera, was bright with a white glow, something you could see from half a mile away. It opened its mouth like it would yawn, only for the top jaw to peel backwards more than it should have, almost like it was a hood. And the thing stood up,
like a human.
Looking around at the cars and damaged metal which littered the mountain, its eyes landed back on the camera, getting back down on all fours like nothing out of the ordinary had occurred, and it walked out of the light, towards the other side of the hill from Jesse's house and repair shop. I was speechless. My uncle looked up at me, clearly still trying to get over what he had caught on camera. He had served in Vietnam, the Gulf War, and the beginning of Afghanistan. He had seen some messed up stuff, and he had a severe case of post-traumatic stress disorder. But that was something he never saw before, and the fact that I saw it proved that it wasn't just his PTSD acting up. Something was on that mountain that no one could explain, and it horrified most of the family. Me, my uncle, both my cousins, my mother, and my grandmother. However, that horror soon turned into a morbid curiosity which I fear almost got me killed. Skip forward a few more years, everything had been calm with a few minor scares. The lights at the top of the hill were still there almost every night, while not triggering the cameras. Sounds were heard at night like the mix of a wolf's howl and a female's screech. And that creature only appeared one more time on the cameras. Around July of 2021, I was sent up the hill in the evening around 7:30 p.m. to bring some pieces down from at least 5 cars for the restoration of a 1968 Ford Mustang, which had been Jesse's passion project since 2007, with one of the cars being particularly far up the road, on the other side of the hill deep in the hollow. I got in Jesse's old Dodge and began the drive, collecting the materials as I climbed the hill and began to go back down the other side. Up until that point, everything had gone smoothly. Just a few days previous, a horrific thunderstorm had swept through the hollow, causing the creek at the bottom of the valley to flood severely, turning the usually dry valley into a raging river. However, we had not checked the damage ourselves up until this point. Once I reached the spot the car was supposed to be, I was shocked to see the vehicle stuck in the creek roughly 100 feet away, thankfully half on dry land. I got out of the truck slowly and checked my watch, 9 p.m. The sun was setting over the hollow, blocked by the tall mountains all around me. Then it all went silent. Noticing the eerie silence, I immediately felt uneasy as I walked towards the wrecked vehicle, saying to myself, all I need to do is get the part and leave. That's all. Nothing more, nothing less. Thankfully, I had thought to leave the Dodge's lights on to light up where I would be working, two bright beams of yellow light shining along the gravel bank alongside the creek. However, anything outside of the beams was almost pitch black now. I made it to the wreck while only getting my shoes and the bottom of my jeans wet, and began working at the part in the silence. With my back towards the creek, I heard a splash on the other side of the water.
Immediately going for the pistol that I had placed on the top of the car.
Jesse had ordered anyone going up the hill to arm themselves against wildlife.
Really, we all knew what it was for. That thing?
We had taken to calling it a skinwalker, even though we didn't think it really was. Truth was, we didn't know anything about it, besides the fact that we decided that it might be connected to Indian folklore.
At least that's what made the most sense to us at the time.
Slowly, I turned towards where the sound came from, holding my pistol close to my side, and I saw nothing. But I could still hear something in the creek wading through the water. I shouted out to it, my voice trembling but confident. "Who's there?"
I have a weapon.
Honestly, looking back on it, I could have worded it much better in case whatever was in the creek was human. But my mind at the time wasn't thinking about it being a human. My mind went straight to that skinwalker. Images of its misfigured form on the videos flashed through my mind, causing me to clench the pistol's grip harder. As I watched where the sounds were coming from, the thing reached the other side of my truck, shrouded in darkness still.
I checked the time once more. 9:30 p.m. I had been watching this thing for at most 30 minutes, and all the thing was doing was moving, stalking me like its prey.
Then my truck shook, like something was pushing against the other side of it. Whatever it was very strong. Then I saw those bright yellow lights, the ones from the top of the hill, staring right into my soul from the other side of the truck. Then they rose higher and higher above the truck's cab, and those antlers glistened in the moonlight. Just like an elk's, just like the creatures. It was here, staring at me from the shadows. The truck shook once more as the thing walked on two legs around the bed of the truck, getting back down on four legs. The sickening snap of bones and a sound I can only describe as rubbing two raw pieces of meat together echoed through the hollow, the thing's human-like arms turning into wolf or coyote-like forelimbs. All while this occurred, it never took its eyes off of me, walking towards the lights until it entered the headlights, its forelegs first, those long, spindly limbs not having any right being on a being that size. They were covered in patchy elk-like fur, drenched in a sweat-like liquid. The face followed, looking like a wolf's skull. But that's all it was. A skull with only the top jaw covered in deer-like skin, but it hung on like a cloth instead of actual skin. The head was followed by its long back, skin wrapped tightly against the ribs and spinal cord. The creature looked like it hadn't eaten for decades, long strands of drool coming from its lower skull like a jaw, even going through it. Staring into its eyes, I was paralyzed with fear.
I almost missed the video at that moment. It was easier to look at than the thing in person.
It couldn't stare into your soul through a video. It couldn't attack you in the video. It couldn't even stalk you in the video. But here, in the hollow, it can stare into your soul. It can attack you. It can stalk you. And it can most definitely kill you. And out here, no one would know until it was too late. Then, the creature stood on its hind legs once again, that sickening snapping and squishing sound coming back as it reached almost 8 feet tall, the arms and legs changing back to a more human-like form, and it raised its head towards the sky, that cloth-like skin on the top jaw peeling back, the lower jaw hanging low. But as it raised its head, that paralyzing stare let go of me, and it drew my pistol as quickly as I could, aiming at it and firing around into its lower jaw, knocking it off balance. Unfortunately, those of you who have fired a gun know that it can also send a ringing sensation into your ear for a good few seconds afterwards, a few seconds I would never wish on anyone. The creature stared back down at me, the mouth wide open, revealing a face inside, a decayed face.
A dead face, a human face.
The skinwalker, or whatever it was, quickly shot back down to all fours, the human jaw screeching at me, a sound which broke through the ringing in my ears and caused me to fall back. I looked back up, just in time to see the thing scamper away into the forest on the other side of the creek, screeching all the way. Quickly, I managed to get back into my truck and speed up to the top of the mountain.
And all the way down the other side, once I got to the house, I ran inside.
Trying to get someone, but everyone was asleep by this point. I checked the clock one last time, 9:55 p.m. I had watched that thing for almost an entire hour, an hour I would never get back. The very next morning I told everyone once the shop opened, and my cousins went down into the hollow and found footprints, or I should say, hoofprints, all along the bank of the creek, leading into our neighbor's property. The prints were too big to be any animal, almost twice the size of an elk print. Since that attack, the far side of the hill has been closed off with a barbed fence, keeping anyone from crossing into the hollow. We still use the hill to place wrecked cars, but only up to the peak. Word never got out of the county about the creature's attack, so this will be the first time it's been mentioned anywhere outside of it. That very same July, I quit my job at Jesse's repair shop, and I live hundreds of miles away from that thing. However, something followed me after the attack and haunts me to this very day. No physical attacks, only mentally. I went to therapy and that helps, but it hasn't left me or my home, no matter where I move. The sight of that thing's face and body will never leave me either, still horrifying me to this day. Next story. Cage bound. This happened during the summer of 1989 when I was 6. I remember playing hide and seek with my brother and sister while on a family holiday. We found a field near our holiday home, so it was kind of isolated.
Ideal for hide and seek.
There were a few rusted barrels around with sharp edges, and the grass was dead and yellow. There was something weird about the area. My sister went through the rules of hide and seek because I had a habit back then of peeking too soon or moving from one hiding place to another. My brother and I split up while my sister counted. I found a place behind a cluster of rusted barrels. All was silent for a while. Nothing but the cold Irish summer breeze brushing my hair and rustling the grass. The smell of the rusted barrel was so strong I could almost taste it. Little by little, I could hear my sister counting down from 20. It sounded like she was heading my way, so I peeked up from the barrel. I caught a glimpse of her heading away from my vantage point at 10 o'clock. She'll never find me, I thought. That's when I heard flapping sounds. I peeked up even more from the barrel and saw it. A cage door built into the wall across from me, secured with a brass lock. The next thing I remember is this tall, white, humanoid bird with a sharp, yellow beak and ink black eyes. When it saw me, it thrashed around and screeched. Those screeches are something I can still hear 36 years later. If you can imagine ambulance sirens piercing your eardrums, that's what it was like.
And it was relentless. My presence really pissed this thing off.
Its beak was fixed open, and its ink-black eyes seemed to be popping from its skull. It seemed like it was trying to break through the bars and get at me. Its beak got through and stayed there for what felt like forever. It retracted its beak and started flailing around. It was thrashing and screeching and banging against the bars.
Over and over and over.
If that cage door hadn't been there, I might not even be telling this story right now. This thing was very strong. Its thick black talons made scraping sounds on the concrete floor of the enclosure, and it seemed to be jumping until I realized it was flapping its wings. I snapped out of it, recoiled, screamed, and ran away from my hiding spot. I turned around and saw its beak dive through the bars and pivot. I met my brother and sister, who had joined forces to find out why I was freaking out. I told them both what had happened. My sister rolled her eyes and my brother asked if I'd imagined it.
I insisted that what I saw was real and not my imagination. The three of us walked back to the area.
The cage was still there, but it was empty. The floor was littered with feathers and what looked like scratches from the thing's talons. The bars weren't pried open, and the lock was still in place. This is the best I can do trying to remember something that happened such a long time ago.
I do know this. It is not my imagination.
It was not a normal-sized bird. This thing was a tall, white, humanoid bird creature.
I don't know if it was a cryptid or something more mythological. The jury is out.
What do you think? Next story, it arrived before me. This happened to me today as I'm writing this, so this is fresh in my mind. I wanted to share this with you all because perhaps someone else has gone through something similar. Right now, I don't know anyone who has experienced the same as I just did, and I feel a bit confused, to be honest. As a backstory, I bought over a decade ago a messenger bag from a thrift store. It was a brand bag from a Finnish brand, Marimekko. Marimekko items are really expensive, especially back then when I was living from one paycheck to another, and I could have never been able to afford any of their items. So I was happy to discover this beige-coloured Marimekko bag with only €4. Usually even the used bags are from €40 forward, up to €300. The brand is iconic in Finland and has become trendy again in recent years among teenagers and young adults, who have especially discovered their tote bags and messenger bags after serving me really well for the last decade. My poor Marimekko bag was in such a poor condition that a pen I always carry with me came through from a hole on the bottom of the bag. It had tears and holes all over. The snap fastener was about to come off any moment, and its strap was starting to tear off from its seams, so I had no other option than to go look for a new bag. I didn't want to buy anything expensive because I'm still on a hunt for a new Marimekko bag from a thrift store or from an online auction with a reasonable price, but I couldn't go without a messenger bag of some sort. After searching for weeks, because I'm picky, I located a simple black messenger bag from a cheap store selling mainly junk. It's not the prettiest bag, but it fits my needs, seems to be able to withhold rain. And what's the best? It is covered with zipper pockets.
I'm a classic woman in a way that I always have so many little things with me, from tissues
to a small emergency bag, and from scissors to a small hand towel for public restrooms that having lots of
pockets in a bag is like winning a little
lottery. When I got back home with the new bag, I decorated it with pins, a reflector, and a keychain.
I thought it looked cute, but when I used it for the first time, I realized that I actually want to have a big keychain for the main pocket zipper I'll be using the most. I like to get a good hold on a zipper, so I always have something hanging on them.
Even my wallet zipper has a small keychain to help me to open it. Me, I'm a little critter loving keychains, especially big ones. Mascots, figurines, pom-poms, you name it. I remembered that I have a black fluffy heart keychain. I have not used it more than a few times many years ago before I stored it away to wait for a better bag, so it was almost brand new. Still as soft and shiny as the day I bought it. It's relatively big, around the size of my palm, so I figured it would be the perfect choice for this new bag. The colours match too.
I fastened the big fluffy heart on my bag well because I didn't want it to fall off and get lost. They don't sell them anymore, you know?
Then I headed out to a nearby kiosk to pick up a parcel that had arrived today, as I had to order some items for my mother, as she can't really use online stores or pick-up services like these due to her age. To pick the parcel, you need to show a pickup code to the cashier at the kiosk from your phone. Before entering the kiosk, I went to take my phone out to have it ready to be scanned when it's my turn, but the fluffy heart-shaped keychain had wrapped itself around the messenger bag strap. While untangling it to get my bag open so that I can get my phone out, I thought to myself that this was perhaps not a good idea, and maybe I need a different kind of a keychain. Something in a shorter chain and easier to grab on, like a pom-pom or a flat reflector or something. I managed to untangle the keychain, get my phone out and receive the parcel. I put the parcel into my backpack, as it was way too big for my messenger bag, and made a quick stop at a nearby convenience store before heading home. The day was sunny, and as my windows are facing south, I keep curtains closed during sunny weather to avoid my apartment heating up too much. as we have no ACs or ceiling fans in this country. This means that while the day outside is sunny and bright, as today, in mid-August, my apartment is dim even during the day. As I got back home and stopped to take my shoes off, I noticed a black bundle on the floor in the dimness of my apartment. Further away in the apartment on a hallway, a small, round, solid black object. I stared at it, wondering for a second if I had somehow dropped socks or underwear on the floor, while knowing for certain that that thing was definitely not there when I left home 15 minutes earlier. I turned on the lights to see better, and when I got closer to it, I kid you not, it was my fluffy black heart keychain, the very same I had just untangled from my bag strap 10 minutes ago in front of the kiosk. Shocked and not believing what I was seeing, I took a look at my bag and sure enough, the keychain's chain was empty.
Only the keychain's fastener was hanging from my bag.
It was indeed the very same fluffy heart.
On my floor.
Mysteriously having arrived at my apartment before me while freeing itself from its chain, I picked the black heart from my floor in disbelief, muttering out loud that this can't be real. I inspected the heart better to see what had happened. How had it even come off? And it looked like the little string which connected the heart to the keychain fastener had just been removed without touching anything in the process. I went through the heart, and there was no spot on its fluffy fabric where the string would have been originally glued to.
I found no holes from its seams where the string would have come apart.
It was a completely solid, complete keychain, albeit now looking like it had always been just a stuffed toy, and on my bag, the keychain fastener was hanging with a little string attached to it, which looked like someone had just tied the black string around it neatly for no reason. There was nothing wrong with them either. The keychain just disconnected itself from its chain without anything breaking. I went through it multiple times trying to find a ripped seam, but there just isn't one. There isn't even a tiny spot where the soft, fluffy fabric would be coarse or damaged to give a hint of possible glue. It's not even dirty or dusty. It is still brand new like when I attached it to my bag, but now only looking and feeling like a soft,
heart-shaped plushie. I have no idea how a
keychain broke itself free without breaking itself in the process and made its way to my home,
floor away before me when it had just been tangled around my bag strap a few minutes earlier.
First I thought, after I gathered myself from the initial shock, that perhaps I did drop it. Perhaps the keychain did indeed break apart from its chain and some kind spirit or glitch returned it to me so that I wouldn't be sad. But I don't know. The only thing I do know is that a fluffy heart keychain just came off from its holder without any evidence that it ever even was a keychain in the first place. There's no way for me to reattach it back to the keychain fastener unless I buy super glue and hope for the best. So I guess I do indeed need that new keychain for the zipper.
Perhaps a non-glitching pom-pom this time.
Next story, saying goodbye. I'm going to start by saying I know my actions were dumb, but I'm a spooky gal and would probably do it again. This happened a few years ago when my husband and I were staying with his 96-year-old great-grandmother in Appalachia. His family has a 300-acre cattle farm, and we needed somewhere to stay while saving for a house, and Miss Mary needed someone to make sure she didn't fall or have an accident.
As I said, I am a spooky gal, and as you can imagine, there isn't much to do in the middle of nowhere.
So I started testing my Appalachian knowledge by whistling at night. The first night nothing happened, but in the morning one of our chickens had died.
I didn't really think much of it, but every morning for 3 days we'd wake up to a dead chicken.
No obvious cause of death, no sickness. It wasn't abnormally hot or cold outside. I tried whistling during the day then, thinking maybe I'd see something if I tried during the day. As soon as noise left my mouth, a branch on the big oak tree out front broke with a loud crack and a bug flew into my face.
That's not to say it flew into me by accident. It flew at me repeatedly, smacking my face until I stopped whistling, almost as if even the insects knew I was being dumb.
I stopped whistling after that. I wasn't exactly scared, but I trusted that what I was doing could be putting us all at risk. Months passed with no incident, but a few days before we moved out, I was listening to Night Call by Kravinsky. My husband was working nights and Miss Mary was in the hospital. Nothing serious, just getting fluids and combating a cold, although maybe that was serious for a 96-year-old. The song starts and some of the lyrics sound louder to me. I want to drive you through the night down the hill. My body started to feel as if I was underwater.
I'm going to tell you something you don't want to hear. I don't know how, but I knew whatever heard my whistle before was here now. I'm going to show you where it's dark, but have no fear. I felt numb.
Not cold, not scared, not excited, just numb, and I went outside.
Immediately I was greeted by a rabbit, standing just off the porch, staring directly at me.
I don't know how long we watched each other, but eventually the rabbit took a few hops towards the back of the house, where the woods are and the chicken coop. Then it looked back at me as if asking me to follow. So I did. You've never seen darkness like Appalachia. It's so dense you feel it in all of your senses, or at least I did. As I followed the rabbit closer and closer to the chicken coop, unable to make out anything in absence of light, every hair on my body began to stand up. My heart started pounding and I finally felt afraid. Something was waiting for me. I slowly turned around, trying to appear more calm than I was, and I walked back to the front of the house. Just before I stepped out of the darkness, I looked back and I said, "We're moving in a couple of days. If you follow me, I'll talk with you then, I know."
I'm the dumb white chick that dies in horror movies that everyone screams at.
But it felt like they wanted to talk. So I went inside and shut the door. My entire body got hot, like the worst hot flash you can imagine. I was sweating and shaking.
I never saw anything in Appalachia, but it saw me. I haven't had any weird experiences since then, and Miss Mary hasn't either. I don't know why it didn't kill me. Maybe it did just want to talk.
But something exists in those mountains. Something you should be afraid of. Next story. The creature by the fence. To this day, I don't know what I saw, but whatever it was, it has been burned into my mind. I was 18 when this happened. It was the opening day of rifle season in Wisconsin. It had snowed the day before, so when I got to my blind,
I found it collapsed because of the snow.
I was pretty annoyed to find my blind like this, but I had to fix it and prop it back up again. But something felt off. As I was fixing my blind, it felt like I was being watched. I thought it was nothing and shook it off. After propping my blind back up, I heard footsteps behind me. I froze and everything went quiet. I slowly turned around and saw two bucks standing there looking at me. I was scared, but mostly confused because this has never happened to me. They were just standing there, not moving, and I couldn't see them breathing. It was cold enough to see your breath.
As I was looking at them, I slowly slid my rifle off my shoulder, but then all sound came back and the two bucks just walked away.
After that, I knew the rest of the day would have been odd. As the day went on, I still had that feeling of being watched. That feeling was coming from the way I walked in. It was around 3 in the afternoon when I heard a coyote call, but something felt off about it. It sounded distorted, like someone or something tried to do their very own coyote call, but failed miserably. As the sun was going down past the trees, I grabbed my rifle and backpack, then started my way up to my car. The route I take has me crossing as few fences on the property I hunt on, but as I was coming up on the last fence, that feeling of being watched came back. I immediately stopped in my tracks and looked around to see if I can see what was watching me. That's when I see it. Some kind of personal, humanoid thing hunched on the fence post. Just looking at me, its arms were pretty long and skinny, like it was malnourished. It had short, patchy hair on its body, and its skin was a light grey. As I stared at it more, its eyes were a deep black, almost like a void. It had fairly pointy ears. I couldn't see a mouth or any signs of a mouth. All I could do was stand there and watch it, like it was watching me. I slowly took a few steps towards it. As I took my second step, it quickly perched up. I stopped where I was and made the foolish mistake of saying, "Hello!" Then I saw its head tilt like a dog when it was curious. The creature then hopped down from the fence post and stood straight up. It stood at around 6 foot tall, and its hands were almost claw-like, with long, pointy nails. Then it did something that made my blood run cold. It spoke like it was mimicking me when I said hello, but it was distorted like that coyote I heard earlier.
I tried pulling my rifle up, but it slipped out of my shaking hands and fell to the ground. After it hit the ground, I looked up to where the creature was.
To my horror, it was gone. When I picked my rifle up, I quickly snapped back to reality and bolted up the hill and crossed the fence where the creature was, then finally made it to my car. Without any hesitation, I sped out of there and raced back to town. My uncle and brother told me they would be at a bar in town after they got out of the woods, so I went there. When I walked inside, I sat next to my brother and uncle. When they asked if I saw a ghost because my face was white, I lied and told them that I was pretty cold and just needed to warm up.
I never told them what happened, and to this day I'm scared that I would run into that creature again when I'm hunting.
Next story, Blackjack Drive. In 1997, we built a new home construction. Our home was 3 blocks from a place called Mazard Prairie Creek Battlefields in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Within 2 weeks of baby men, I began to see an apparition of a soldier dressed in grey. I saw him every day, standing between my kitchen and living room for about 2 years. He never moved. He never spoke. Finally, one day, a friend of mine named Meredith and I decided to do an Ouija board. She tried to communicate with him. From that day forward, 2 saw him every day, standing between my kitchen and living room for about 2 years. He never moved. He never spoke. Finally, one day, a friend of mine named Meredith and I decided to do a Ouija board. She tried to communicate with him. From that day forward, I never saw him again. But what happened next was terrifying and haunted me for years until we finally sold the house last June. Immediately, I started having horrific and demonic knot terrors. This went on for the next 25 years that I lived in the house.
At first, I started dreaming about witches. They would cast spells on me and torture me.
They would get inside my body and cause me physical harm.
Over the next several years, I had 9 surgeries for 9 different health reasons.
At first, I had a stalker who broke into my house and attacked me. He broke my neck and caused me a lot of other physical harm that I don't wish to discuss further. He also broke my neck. Then I had a throat surgery, a stomach surgery, ex-gallbladder surgery, 3-letter surgery, and a lump in my breast. All of this occurred immediately after we played the Ouija board, and all of these were things that in my dreams the witches did to me.
After that, and I don't know why, we tried the Ouija board again to make it go away. Only thing just took a darker turn.
At this point, I started having severe demonic night terrors.
They came so horrible.
They drove me to the point of a suicide attempt, which was almost successful. I was in the hospital in the ICU for several weeks after my attempt, during which I was hallucinating the entire time of devils and demons. When I came home, things did not get any better.
I immediately started seeing demons in my house.
I believe this was a direct use of messing around with the Ouija board with forces on nothing about.
I was awake one day, and I don't know if you want to call it a daydream or hallucination, or if it was my reality. I was sitting in my bed, and I looked down.
And my wrists were tied down to the bed. I looked over and I saw my cat being sucked into the baseboards and being murdered. I looked out the window and all I saw was hell on earth. The entire world was on fire, and there were mounds of dirt like mountains. These mountains of dirt had white doors on them and had animals and babies nailed to them. At the time I had 4 boys and they were all nailed to the doors along with 2 of my dogs. And I watched horror as instructional equipment with buckets on the front went forward and chopped their bodies in half and washed their guts fall out, still to this day.
I am terrorized by this.
It all seemed real at the time. I became plagued with sleep, paralysis, and sightings of demons and what I call an old hag. My husband thought I was insane. It had me committed a number of times. It was not until we finally sold the house and moved that everything stopped.
Last year, we sold the house and moved to another state.
Since leaving the house, I have had absolutely no further activity. Next story, the return of the shadow in the dark. Hello all, it's been a while. Hope you're well. I recently wrote into the show earlier this year and shared a story that actually got featured on the show, thanks Darkness You Rock, regarding a paranormal incident that I experienced when I was very young. For reference, the episode in question was the March 5th episode titled Dragged into the Woods on Unexplained Encounters. About 30-ish minutes in, you'll find Shadows in the Dark, a story that I will now live in infamy. You see, I've always been the type to believe that things always happen for a reason.
Never by chance.
Since that day, I wrote in, I've been looking over my shoulder a little more than usual. It seems everywhere I turn I catch a glimpse of something, but only for a split second, then gone again.
Sometimes a whisper.
Other times more physical, like a breathing down your neck that sends shivers down your spine.
Like I was being followed by someone.
Or in this case, something. As of this writing, it's been about 8-ish weeks since the incident took place. It was a Friday. Me and my fiancée had gotten off work, dropped the kiddo off with the grandparents, and we were off to DoorDash for the afternoon. It had been a pretty satisfying night, making a little over $100 in just the couple of hours we were out.
Overall pretty solid.
No whispers, no breathing down the neck. I'd almost forgotten about it. Soon, I would find out just how wrong I was. We got home around 9:45, just before the rain hit. Weatherman called for isolated storms throughout the evening.
Imagine that.
Perfect night for paranormal activity, right?
I mean, you couldn't script a Hollywood movie better than this. About 10:38, I got up to go to the restroom.
South Park was playing on the TV. If memory serves, it was the episode where Mackie loses it over the deuce in the boys' urinal.
As I walked to the bathroom, the lights began to flicker off and on.
I quickly realized I had left my phone on the armrest of the couch, so I turned back to grab it for a light in case the power went out before I could return. I make my way down the hallway just past my daughter's bedroom when there was a flash of lightning outside house, knocking out the lights, followed by a loud crack of thunder that shook the entire house. A moment later, the generator kicked on, restoring the power back to normal.
I heard my fiancée scream, so I ran back to make sure she was okay. That's when I saw it.
There, standing in our front doorway, was the shadow. The same shadow man I'd saw years ago as a kid. The same dark fedora, the same cane, down to the very same piercing red eyes.
Only this time my fiancée saw it too.
Now I need to stop here and point out that up until this point, somewhere inside me, I've always felt like the paranormal only affects those that the anomalies tie themselves to. But in this moment, I couldn't have been more wrong about anything in my life.
Everything inside me told me to tell my fiancée to run, but I just stood there, frozen, like a deer in headlights.
Shocked by the sight of what stood before me. My past had finally caught up with me. And now I have a decision to make.
Fight or flight.
What's it gonna be, man?
After what felt like an eternity, I got up the courage to speak. What do you want?
Why have you come back? I paused, waiting for a response, but it just stood there staring at me with those burning red eyes, staring into my soul.
After a brief pause, I spoke again, louder this time.
What do you want? This time, the shadow raised its cane and pointed it in my direction as if to say,
You! My fiancée, in a panic, jumped up and tried to run safety, but the shadow lifted its cane once again, and all of a sudden, the doors in the house closed with a mighty bang.
At this moment, I know I need some kind of a weapon, and happen to remember I kept one of those bug assault pump-action rifles in the kitchen. I glance over, and it's within reach, on the counter to my right. All right, self.
Fight or flight, I said to myself.
Let's go.
I make a mad dash and grab the rifle, give it a quick pump.
The shadow lunged in my direction, moving faster than my eyes could follow. It reaches out to grab my throat. I squeeze the trigger, and bam! Square in the torso. It let out a deathly shriek and vanished. I looked around, waiting for it to reappear, but nothing. Quiet. I glance over, and my fiancée is hiding underneath her vanity in the next room over in the den.
Are you all right? I asked. Do I look all right? She yelled. What the hell even was that?
I paused and then continued. It's a long story. I said, the short of it is, I have been stalked by this shadow creature off and on all my life. Today, however,
is the first time it's been violent. It's also the first time anyone other than me has seen it. She then gave me a look, as if in disgust.
"This is crazy," she said. "I've never had anything like this happen to me before." She then put her face in her hands and began to sob. I held her as tight as I could and gave her as much comfort as I possibly could give. Suddenly, a million thoughts began to race through my mind. Is this it? Am I about to lose the love of my life over a curse that continues to haunt me? Should I end this here and now for her safety? For her and our baby's safety? Why am I being haunted?
What does this entity want with me?
A few days after the incident, I consulted with my psychiatrist, who referred me to a parapsychologist who specializes in paranormal investigation, who seems to think that I may in fact be the subject of a possible possession attempt. Since then, I have consulted with numerous religious and spiritual advisors who have performed a cleanse on my home and placed some protective objects around the home for safety. I have since taken the religious route in fighting this entity, whoever or whatever it may be. As of this writing, there has not been another incident with the shadow.
Have we seen the last of this sinister spook?
Time will tell. One thing I know is for certain. I could go the rest of my life without seeing the shadow in the dark again.
Next story, the Firewood Phantasm High Darkness fam.
I wanted to share with you something that I have no idea how to explain and maybe get some answers. This happened only 8 or 9 hours ago. I apologize in advance if my writing is messy, but I am still mentally swallowing what exactly happened. For some context,
I live in rural New York. I know that sounds like an oxymoron.
But when you get up into Adirondack country,
it really feels like you're the only one around.
I have a couple of well-off friends up here, and we were having a small get-together for a friend's birthday. My buddy Damien was hosting us at a really nice cabin retreat he owned up in the mountains, probably miles from any other civilization. Accompanying us was Alex, Jacqueline, Justine, Elizabeth and Raina, the birthday girl, all fake names for privacy. We got everything we needed to stay up there for a couple of days, bringing laundry, toiletries, bed sheets and food, and met at Alex's house in the rain before heading towards the cabin that Damien was directing us to, with Justine driving Elizabeth.
Raina and Jacqueline close behind us. Dude, we're gonna lose power. What are we gonna do if we lose power?
Alex asked, staring out at the precipitated static beyond his window. It had been raining relentlessly the entire drive up, so much so that we could barely see Justine's car following us on the road. I've got a fireplace in the house and some candles around.
And we got heaps of firewood right outside the cabin.
We'll be good, Damien responded. We got up there around 8 in the evening, and sure enough, the power had gone out at the cabin. It was spacious and cozy, and the rain made the whole property more ambient and welcomingly atmospheric, despite the lack of electricity. We got inside and Jacqueline, Justine, Elizabeth and Raina all began to light candles around the house, while myself, Damien and Alex went outside to find some usable firewood. We found the towering wall of firewood right across from the porch, but being that there was nothing above the wood, it was drenched. So we kept on trudging through the rain and made our way to the side of the porch, where we found just enough dry wood to probably keep us going through the night. I had brought up to Damien that we would definitely be needing more wood over the coming days, but he dismissed me. That wood will be dry by the morning, likely. If not, it's probably not a great idea to burn it. But we'll make do with whatever we end up with. I was annoyed at this response, as burning wet firewood can be dangerous. But for now, I was resigned to accept whatever answer he gave me so that we could get out of the pouring rain. We brought the wood inside with shiny, soul-figured puddles following behind us and ignited the fire. Me, Alex and Damien all sat by the fire wrapped in towels to dry off. Should we cover up the firewood so that it doesn't get any more wet than it already is? We're gonna need that wood eventually, Alex said suddenly as we held our hands above the warm hearth. What, with like a tarp or something, you mean? I responded, sharing his concern but unsure of what we could actually do that with. Before Alex could answer, Damien spoke up too. "You guys can go do that if you want. I've got some tarps in the laundry room. But I'm staying in here. I'm already soaked enough and the rain is freezing out there." I couldn't argue with that,
as I really didn't want to go out in the frigid rain either.
especially not now that it was dark outside. Nothing too significant happened from then on until later in the night, and after we had adequately dried off, we settled down to enjoy ourselves. This was supposed to be a vacation after all. It was probably somewhere around midnight, and we were all playing poker by candlelight at the dining table. Outside, the sky was blanketed in ebony with soft blotches of colliginous storm clouds overhead, coalescing into an impenetrable curtain around the faint stars above, catching any scraps of meager starlight before it could leak out onto the visible sky. The storm continued to hammer relentlessly at the roof above us with countless liquid assaults and tempestuous fury. Justine was the first to broach the subject from the various things we had been talking about over the course of the night. "Did you guys cover the firewood with something?" Raina chimed in too. "Yeah, we don't want to burn wet firewood." Damien rolled his eyes at the remarks. "We're not burning that wood tonight, so why bother? If it's still raining tomorrow, we'll cover it in the morning." This didn't seem to satisfy the inquiry, but it was clear that we weren't going to get Damien to budge, so we took his answer and continued to enjoy ourselves. I had been facing the front door at the dining table, so I could see what little could be seen out the front door and front windows from where I was. It was jet black, like a mountain-spanning shadow had washed over us for some time, until I saw a plasmic hue burst forth from somewhere in front of the porch. Instinctually, I catapulted from my chair and sprinted to the porch, sending the chair I'd been sitting in to the floor. Damien and Alex followed suit. I got to the porch to see that a small pile of the wet firewood had caught fire, out of nowhere. No lightning, no combustion, no nothing, and in the pouring rain at that. It had just caught fire. "What in the world?"
I muttered to myself.
Damien turned to me frantically. "What do we do?" He yelled to me nervously, barely audible over the rain. "What do you mean, what do we do?"
"It's a fire, we put it out," I exclaimed as the wood continued to burn. "Well, how? It's already raining, the fire just isn't going out," Damien yelled again. "There's gotta be a fire extinguisher somewhere, right?" "Man, I don't know." "This is your house, I don't live here," I yelled in reply.
"Well then let's go find it, for Christ's sake,"
Alex belted at us both.
We all three ran inside and scoured the house for a fire extinguisher or anything similar. It didn't take long for me to find it in the laundry room, and I ran back out to the porch to put the fire out. And then there was no more fire. It was just gone. No mass of swirling smoke, no dying embers, no nothing. Nothing that would be characteristic of a fire going out. I walked over to the pile of wood, baffled. The charred bark was peeling off the wood as if it had been put out recently, but the wood itself wasn't even warm. I thought to myself about what could have happened to that wood for a fire to suddenly just appear and disappear in a couple of minutes, but no answer was satisfactory. I walked back to the porch, and everyone was already out there. "What happened?" Jacqueline yelled to me impatiently.
I shrugged.
"I have no clue. There was just suddenly a fire, and then there wasn't a fire anymore." "What? What are you talking about? Did you not just put it out?" Liz exclaimed over the rain.
"Yeah, isn't that what you came out to do?"
Raina added. "I mean, yeah, but I didn't actually use the extinguisher. It just..."
"Extinguished," I replied confusedly, still clueless on what exactly had just unfolded.
"Well, get inside and we'll talk about it there. You're drenched," Jacqueline said loudly, ushering us all inside and closing the door behind us. Alex and Damien were waiting inside.
"Did you get it?" Alex asked. "I don't know, let's just focus on something else right now, I guess," I said, in a dazed voice, sitting down at the hearth and donning a towel to dry off again.
Nobody argued, and after a while we went back to playing poker. We were enjoying ourselves, but now there was a palpably collective concern in the air. After about an hour, the girls turned in, and it was just Alex, Damien, and me. "So, what happened out there?" Alex asked me curiously. "I don't know, okay? The fire was there and then it just wasn't," I said impatiently. "All right, geez," Alex responded defensively. I was walking over to put the fire in the fireplace out when Damien exclaimed,
Dude, what on earth?
I whipped around and saw that there was an orange glow outside the window again, and again I immediately sprinted towards the door to again see that the firewood that had caught ablaze before was again on fire. Okay, this is starting to freak me out, Alex said as we all ran out onto the porch. This time I was ready and grabbed the fire extinguisher that I had placed by the door. I jogged to the firewood pile, fidgeting with the extinguisher hose out in the rain.
And that's when it happened.
Something that I have no idea how to describe or how it was even possible. The flaming firewood
Morphed. The fire that clothed the logs raged angrily with orange tendrils whipping around wildly.
and it glowed with such an intensity that it completely concealed the wood beneath the flames, as if the wood was no more and the thing was just a mass of unnatural flames. It seemed to slowly stand up as the fiery log shifted into a crude and impractical but distinctly humanoid figure, like a stick figure. It just came together, like scraps of metal coming together around a magnet. It stood mere feet away from me for what seemed like an eternity. I was frozen, paralyzed with a cocktail of fear, disbelief, and awe brewing in my head.
What in the world was going on?
Was I seeing things? Was this something that I was hallucinating? Was I even awake? There were so many questions that this fire thing raised. It emanated an ethereal heat as its silhouette smoldered with a wrathful saffron, and it stood idle parallel to me, still flaming too bright to see beneath its immolated cloak, and now at least a foot taller than me.
It suddenly broke the standstill between us and just ran off.
The fire ran off. The legs jolted about in odd, forced mannerisms, and before I knew it, it was sprinting in a weird and almost cartoonish gait into the woodline. The fire literally just ran off into the woods. I stood in awe for several minutes in the rain. The shock of this bizarre and entirely unbelievable occurrence was too overwhelming for me to disarm. My mouth was slightly agape, and I just stood there in front of where the pile of firewood used to be. After a few minutes, I walked dreamily back to the porch.
Had that really just happened?
Had a pile of flaming logs really just become an entire being and ran off into the woods?
How was that possible?
That shouldn't be possible. My mind was running laps trying to understand what I had just witnessed. You guys saw that.
Right? Alex asked us after a long second of just standing there.
They had seen it too and were just as dumbstruck as I was.
That wasn't just me.
Yeah, I definitely saw it, Damien responded. I didn't say anything, I just went inside and sat by the fire. I didn't know how to address the occurrence without making myself think I was crazy. The girls had already gotten back up and were talking to Damien and Alex. Dude, let's just go back to town for the night.
I don't want to be out here with this weird psychedelic fire stuff, Alex said to me from across the room.
I just nodded wordlessly. We quietly packed into our cars and went back to the nearest town. Everyone was quiet on the way there in our car, and I can only assume the same of Justine's car following behind us. We stayed at the Closet Motel, but I couldn't sleep. The image of that fire-made statue that defied all logic and reason, mere feet away from me, and then running off was practically glued to my eyelids.
Nothing about any of this made any sense. I still didn't know if I was even awake. How could I be awake?
How could this kind of thing genuinely happen? It must have been a dream. There was no way. After seemingly an eternity of jumping down a mental rabbit hole to make any sense of the thing, while everyone else slept, morning had arrived and everyone got up.
Alex and Damien went to get some firewood from Lowe's while me and the girls went to get breakfast.
I didn't eat, and I was so caught up in my own thoughts that I barely even remember what happened during breakfast. We met back up at the motel after breakfast, and that's where I'm writing this from. The whole group wants to go back to the cabin, but I'd do anything not to. Why on earth they'd see that thing and decide, okay, whatever, that's fine, is beyond me, and I don't want anything to do with it. I think I'd genuinely lose my mind being in such close proximity to something that defies all logic, and we have no idea even what happened to the thing or if it's still out in the woods. I guess they're curious about it or something. But although I do have 1,000 burning questions, I don't think that getting the answers will put me at peace, and I'm honestly not curious at all. Curiosity immolated the cat,